John Lynch having his annual pre-draft press conference. What did he say about the 49ers potentially trading up, down? Trey Lance, could he be gone? Brandon Aiyuk. What about Nick Bosa? Asked that question as well. All of John Lynch's comments, what to take away from what he didn't say as well, because as we all know, it is currently lying season as we approach the 2023 NFL Draft. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for subscribing. Hit the button. Welcome to all the new listeners as well. I know draft week, we get a lot of folks coming in trying to get draft takes and all of that. So we appreciate the long-time everydayers, and we appreciate the new folks. And hey, stick around and be an everydayer yourself with us 5 days a week, all through the off season, and of course, all through the season and the postseason, which has been a lot of fun for the 49ers in recent history. All right, Croc, John Lynch taking the podium, talking pre-draft stuff. And I think the biggest topic was probably the Trey Lance rumors and the Trey Lance stuff, right? Is he going to be traded at some point, maybe on draft night, maybe before the draft, maybe after the draft? Not many days left before the draft, since it is draft week. Happy draft week, everybody out there. What was your biggest takeaway with his comments on Trey Lance in the quarterback position?
Well, first, shout out to the 49ers media. I mean, that was the question out the gate. Immediately, it was about Trey Lance, as it should be, right? I mean, it's Trey Lance, it's Brock Purdy. I mean, they've taken over a lot of our topics throughout this offseason, and you assume that it would keep going. But there's actually a lot of takeaways I have from it. I'd say if there's one very big one, it was that they like or love Brock Purdy so much that it's like, we're not going to look into Lamar Jackson. And he kind of tried to, like, I don't want to say backtrack, but try to downplay it because of maybe the roster and the salary and kind of that whole thing.
I have the quote here on that one. And he said, basically, we seem to be linked to everything. I can tell you how convicted we are on Brock and this group of guys, Brock and the group of guys. It's like right. Huey Lewis and the News, right? Prince right. And the revolution, the new power generation. We're not doing our job if we're not looking into things. A lot is limited by how the roster is set up. So what he's saying there is, maybe we check in on things, but we get Lamar Jackson, we lose too much of our roster. So it's not something we can do. We want to stay cheap at quarterback, and they love them some Brock Purdy.
I have a thought on that. And the way I just feel like if you don't have like that franchise guy, you should be trying to find him regardless of if you might lose a guy down the line. That's just my thoughts. Like we've seen other teams do this with their franchise guys, right? I mean, with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, didn't we think like, oh man, you got Patrick Mahomes, you're gonna have to lose some guys, and maybe eventually they lost Tyreek Hill, but I don't think they lost Tyreek Hill because they just overall like just could not sign him. It was just like, yeah, we'll get rid of you. But our quarterback's so damn good, it's not going to matter. We still got Travis Kelce. We still got, weaponry. They're still finding other receivers that are contributing. They still won a Super Bowl without him. So it's like, whatever, we'll lose you. We'll still be fine because our quarterback is that good. So that's my only kind of pushback. Again, I see where he's coming from with that. Whereas, hey, man, we like Brock Purdy so much that we're willing to do these things. But in my opinion, and somebody else might be a little different because they want their quarterback to play a certain way. And there are people that would probably really like to have Brock Purdy over 49er fans. They would rather have Brock Purdy over Lamar because their styles. But at the end of the day, Purdy ain't Lamar Jackson, So just in my opinion, if you can get a quarterback with that type of stature, I feel like you really look into it. And I saw my guy Grant Cohn on Twitter, so I'm not going to take his thunder on what he said, but he said, kind of reminds me of when they said, they like Kirk Cousins so much, and they were so convicted on getting Kirk Cousins, they ain't looking to Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, we don't. At that time, you didn't know what Mahomes was going to be, but you know what Lamar Jackson is. And
they like Jimmy Garoppolo so much that they didn't entertain Tom Brady.
Right. So I mean, hey, I understand where they're coming from, and I think our listeners are gonna understand where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, I feel like if you have an opportunity, and maybe they just didn't have an opportunity to get him, but if you do have an opportunity to get a guy like Lamar Jackson, and that's on the table, I think you have to do more than your due diligence.
And also, I totally see where they would be coming from this angle, and that is that they would be kind of admitting defeat and completely flipping the entire process, the entire plan of their roster, because trading more picks for another quarterback, admitting defeat there.
They've already admitted defeat, though.
Changing their roster. Well, I mean, their
we'll
current
look
plan
into
is
it,
still working. It's accidentally working, but it's still working. This would be a complete other change, even away from Purdy, right?
At what point do they stop playing it safe? Because that's what they do a lot.
They're aggressively safe because they're still doing things and they're still swinging for the fences, but I don't know. They do have a little bit of a blind spot at quarterback. I mean,
like Hargraves is not like signing Hargraves is not playing to say maybe even trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, second round pick middle of the year, or going to get Trey Lance. Like that's not necessarily playing to safe, but they've had these different opportunities where like, hey, we can be more aggressive with doing this. Even we're going to get Matthew Stafford. If you like Matthew Stafford that much, go get him.
That was a weird one. The Matthew Stafford one was weird. They were aggressive getting a McCaffrey too. So they've definitely been aggressive. They move around when they feel like they need to. The Stafford one was weird. They're just like, oh, Stafford. And then all of a sudden like, oh, shoot, there went Matt Stafford. He just went to the Rams and everyone's in Cabo right now. You know, that was a really weird one. And then it made him feel like, oh, shoot, now we got to do something. It was like, well, Stafford was right there. But did Stafford really not want the 49ers? And it was a McVay Stafford thing. I still need to know a lot more about that offseason. That whole offseason was like, what is going on right now? Because the reporting is kind of filled in some gaps, but definitely not all of them. Like, who made the decision to trade up in March? Was that just John and Kyle by themselves? And they walked into work on Mondays like, hey, we trade up, guys. And everyone's like, what? You did what? Jed York's like, excuse me, did you not consult me before you did this? You know, that's the way that whole move felt. And it felt like it was kind of like the tail was wagging the dog a little bit that offseason, and that they were really overreactive to some other things. That's the way it felt with the whole trade up.
So I think that might be, again, maybe I worded it wrong when I say they play it safe, because they do go do things. But I feel like when it's that one thing that's like, and this is more difficult, right? To go all in on, really pursuing an Aaron Rodgers, really pursuing a Matthew Stafford, really pursuing a Lamar Jackson. They typically say, oh, no, well, we kind of like our guy in house. And it's like, well, you saw the Rams say that, well, they like Jared Goff. Like Jared Goff, people act like he's just this bum of a quarterback. He won a lot of games with the damn Rams, a lot, and went to a Super Bowl. And went to how many playoff appearances? And then went to the Lions, and people are looking at the Lions now through a different lens because they have Jared Goff. And even then, it's like, yeah, okay, well, he could win games, he could do this, but like, he's not Matthew Stafford. He's just not him. So what we got to do to get Matthew Stafford, we're going to go get him. And I feel like the 49ers, when they've been given that kind of opportunity where it's like, yeah, we like Jimmy G. Like Jimmy G's solid. Man, but like, are we going to do something that's going to put us over the top at that position? And it's not trading for a quarterback that you don't know. Obviously, that is aggressive, and man, you hope he hits his ceiling. But you got Lamar Jackson, and it's like, or you have an opportunity to get him, and like he changes a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of people that haven't truly watched Lamar Jackson. I think there are people that know what he's capable of doing, and then they go with more of the narrative around him. Go watch Lamar Jackson play, and then you tell me if it's worth losing a player. And y'all don't even know what player that is. You might lose a player. We don't even know who. But tell me if it's worth it when you go watch him play a game. Dude's amazing. Unanimous MVP. 99 overall Madden. Like, That's him.
So another thing that happens is you'll be surprised, Croc, probably getting feedback from fans because fans like their guys. And trading draft picks is one thing because there's nobody attached to them. But if you say, okay, number 97's gone. And fans will say, no, I got a 97 jersey. I don't care if it's a quarterback. That's what they'll say. I'm just telling you, Croc.
I don't even think it got to be that.
That.
I think we threw that hypothetical out there like, hey, what would you do? But it wouldn't even be that. It's give up these 2 first-round picks and you'll lose a player because, man, okay, we got to move some stuff around and we might not be able to pay this player that. But when you have a quarterback that can like play above the XO and still is going to have a terrific team around him. Again, we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs who, and I don't watch Lamar Jackson go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's like that. You know what I'm saying? And, okay, Patrick Mahomes, he lost a Tyreek Hill, and it did not matter. They still won the Super Bowl. And Lamar Jackson is that type of quarterback. Obviously, everything's not great or peachy in Baltimore, but he's won a bunch of games, and they go 14-2 one year. Like, you put him on this 49ers team, especially as is, because I don't think that one player we're talking about potentially losing, I don't think you lose that player yet. It might just be like
it would be more. Well, they would have to do something, probably restructures, which would strain them later in the future, and maybe they don't lose a player now, but they probably have, they probably wouldn't have signed Hargrave. That'd be part of the plan. Maybe you lose more players later, not so many now. Maybe you can't do the Aiyuk Debo thing, which we'll get into next year, which is a big comment.
Go draft a
Lynch,
round receiver. What we talking about?
One more devil's advocate on that. What they love Brock Purdy. What do they think Brock Purdy is, Croc? Actually, I'm gonna let you marinate on that. What do you think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan think Brock Purdy is? I want you to answer that question next. And more reading between the lines on what Lynch said, what John Lynch didn't say, who's available, who's not available in trade during the 2023 NFL draft, and what exactly John Lynch is looking for in the players he does draft next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Oh, those tasty NFL draft props, Crocker, up at FanDuel. There's so many. There's new ones every day at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Let me tell you about some of these props. How about this one? Over under 4.5 total quarterbacks drafted in round 1. I'm going to take the under easy on that. I'm not buying on some of this Hendon Hooker stuff, but there's a lot of it out there, and 4.5 is the number. Give me the under on 4.5 quarterbacks drafted in round 1. Total number of running backs, 1.5. Tight ends, wide receivers, defensive backs, offensive linemen. You can put player draft position props in. You can build your own parlays at FanDuel. It is so much fun, and not just football props, although football futures for 2024 or 2023 NFL season as well are up there. Major League Baseball all summer long, right? So much fun. Hockey, golf, NBA playoffs, boxing, snooker. If you know what snooker is, you can bet on it at FanDuel as well. So get on over to FanDuel right now, and new customers, step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Don't miss out on your chance right now to get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Croc, what do you think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan think Brock Purdy is and could become?
Kirk Cousins.
Do you think that?
Yes.
I think they think this is a better player than Kirk Cousins. That's what I think.
You think so?
I don't know if he is, but I believe that they think he is, because they're treating him like somebody who's going to be better than what Kirk Cousins.
Well, I think Kyle thought Kirk Cousins is better than Kirk Cousins is.
That's true. So okay, so yeah, so Kyle's vision of Kirk Cousins is what you think Kyle thinks Brock Purdy is, which Correct. Is better than our version of what Kirk Cousins is.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think he sees, and again, Brock Purdy played very well in his offense, and he sees what Purdy did, and he was like, well, yeah, that, like, of course, this is what Cousins would look like as well. And I saw, shout out to my guy Larry Kruger, I saw him rattle off some numbers where it was like number one in the NFL, right? So it's like, hey, I got the offense, I just need my Kirk Cousins. I need the guy with this type of ability to do these things, and man, it's going to catapult this offense, or we're going to be doing X, Y, Z. We're going to do these things well, and that's my guy. And I think I have my thoughts.
So Croc is a noted Brock Purdy hater for the new listeners to Locked On 49ers. No, he's not. But I've not really heard this. I kind of want you to expand on it a little bit because I think most people that watch Brock Purdy are closer to where Kyle and John are, where they're like, this was the best offense in the league when he was in there. First in touchdowns, first in passer rating, first in air. Like this was the best team in the NFL once Brock Purdy jumped into the lineup. Are you worried about the elbow? Or are you worried that maybe there's a ceiling there that we're going to realize isn't quite as high as what people are hoping, and that what we saw last year was a very small sample, and it's not going to look like that every year, especially when teams get a book on you?
I'm actually not worried about the elbow at all. I just look at guys with like that type of ability, and for you, it's almost like Hall of Fame or Kirk Cousins and whatever version of him, or Mac Jones, right? So with Mac Jones, and again, I will never, ever, ever be the person that say that this person's ceiling is XYZ, because I've seen Drew Brees, like I've seen Tom Brady, I've seen these guys where maybe not the most freakishly talented guys, but there's something that gets them to play at a level that is extremely high. I think everybody that's listening to this podcast right now, including me, would have taken Drew Brees all day, every day at his peak on the 49ers. And if you told me that, hey, Kyle thinks that this is his version of not just Kirk Cousins, who we feel like is more of a tier 3 type quarterback, but nah, man, like Kyle thinks he's Drew Brees. And if that's the case, then I could see why he looks at him this way. And we're also talking about Purdy for 1 year. He can continue to get better. But I also feel like Mac Jones, a lot of people think that we didn't like Mac Jones or that I ain't like Mac Jones. That is not the case. I just would not have taken Mac Jones top 5. I thought Mac Jones
at 3 was insanity. Trading up for Mac Jones at 3 was another level of insanity. I didn't even like Mac Jones at 12.
Right.
But Mac Jones at the top of the second round, cool.
Good quarterback. Yeah. Right. Like, hey, this is a good quarterback. I feel like he could do a lot of stuff that we see, and it might look a little different, but just essentially like how the offense moves, I thought he'd be good. If you ask 49er fans after his rookie year how they felt about Mac Jones, should have drafted Mac Jones. Now ask them how they feel about Mac Jones now. Although he not a great situation, but just, hey man, how you feel about Mac Jones? No, I'm cool. Like, how do you flip on him so fast? Well, you flip on him so fast because you start to see some weird stuff. And he actually had some weird stuff that started at the end of his rookie year. Just decision making bad, or yelling at coach, like just some weird stuff, right? Weird stuff. But ultimately, I look at those guys and I feel like they're kind of in that same class. The Brock Purdy's of the world, the Kirk Cousins of the world. Like these guys that are like, in my head, he's a tier 3 quarterback. Like he's in the Jimmy Garoppolo tier. He's in the Carr tier. Like to me, he's just that type of guy. So if I have a guy that I'm able to get that's in more of a tier 1/tier 2, well, I want that guy over the tier 3 guy. And so that's not for me to say. I know 49er fans are going to take it this way, but I'm not saying this guy is bad at all. I think Brock Purdy plays some pretty dang good football. Like you said, some of the better football we've seen play with the 49ers. But I also look at this team. I look at the circumstances. I see how everything laid out. I'm like, man, he did an amazing job of taking advantage of that. He really did. But still, from an ability standpoint, I don't think there's, the one play that sticks out in my head where I'm like, ooh-wee, when he against the Seahawks, that was a drop touchdown by Aiyuk. Outside of that, a lot of it was just like, okay, he hit the guy. Okay, he hit the guy. It's like, what's his like signature throw? Like, what's the throws where it's just a lot of things that he just, hey man, I did this well. So because I don't see that special, yeah, if this is my only option, cool. But if you told me I had an option at getting Lamar Jackson, that's where I have to push back on. Like, I'm keeping Purdy over the option of Lamar Jackson. I don't know is an option, but just the way that they shot it down, it was just like, well, we don't even think about that because we have Purdy. And that's why I think they get themselves in a little pickle.
I'm just a little surprised how much publicly they're just talking about Brock Purdy's the guy. And like, that's just pretty much it. And this guy they traded up to number 3 for, who was ready to be the starting quarterback, that has all this talent in the world in Trey Lance, is still an unknown. They can't know how good Trey Lance is yet.
But it doesn't matter because they know what Purdy is. Purdy is their cousins.
It's insane.
So it doesn't matter.
I think they think that Purdy's closer to Brees than Cousins. That's what I think they think.
And if he is, again, it's hard to tell. Shoes, year 1, year 2, year 3 from Drew Brees. I mean, we didn't even know it was Drew Brees, right? Like
Yeah.
when he was at the Chargers, it was like, yeah, he could play. He's a second round pick, he could play. And then he had the shoulder injury, and it was like, Miami Dolphins were like, nope, we ain't touching that shoulder. Saints were like, man, our whole city is underwater. We'll take him. Maybe he can help kind of flip this around. Drafted Reggie Bush, and they got things rolling. And then all of a sudden, Drew Brees, Hall of Fame quarterback. So maybe, because again, we're talking about Purdy after 1 year. Drew Brees, I mean, we didn't even know after 3-4 years.
So
John, they drafted Phillip Rivers. What number? I mean, I know it's a weird flip trade thing with the New York Giants, but I mean, shoes, that's top 5. So I told you right there how they,
Right.
felt about maybe the ability or talent of Drew Brees, regardless of the shoulder injury.
Yeah, and prime Drew Brees had a better arm than Purdy. All these quarterbacks we're talking about, and probably Cousins too, has a better arm than Purdy. And that's where I start to look a little sideways at the 49ers, just be like, look, I don't know where this ceiling is, but if Trey hits his, it's better than Brock Purdy.
Now you're the hater now, so thanks for taking the heat off of me.
Just being real about and the way I've put it with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance is, you, me, everybody listening to this podcast, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan included, they can't know. It's incomplete. There's not enough information to know how good either Brock Purdy or Trey Lance is.
Right.
There's some information to know a little bit more about Purdy's floor, probably, but then there's an elbow injury that I think drops that floor out again. So, and with Trey Lance, there's an obvious upside there, and maybe they've seen enough behind the scenes with Lance to know he's not the guy, to realize, oh man, we just made a mistake. He's not even wired the way we thought he was. Maybe that's part of it. But if that was the case, the Titans ain't calling for him. Texans ain't calling for him. You know what I mean? Because they would know the same thing.
I don't think it's quite to that extent, because again, now that they've seen every practice, I've seen some, and I've seen enough where it's like, man, he does some things good. Like he does there. I mean, like there's good plays, like there's good throws. It's not the way that Trey Lance is talked about is drastically different than whatever version of him I see in my head. And maybe I'm, I think he's closer to Mahomes than they think he's closer to.
Well, he hasn't put the amount of bad tape out there that bust quarterbacks have, that Zach Wilson has, right? There hasn't been that. There hasn't been the super high-end stuff, but there's been enough on tape. Dude, go back to his last full game that he played in normal weather. That was the Texans game, end of the year, right?
Completed 70% of his passes, threw the deep touchdown, ran for another 50 yards. Like,
he's going to be good. He looks like a good quarterback, and he's a rookie.
And ran for another touchdown that got called back. Not saying that was like, oh, this amazing quarterback, right? Yeah. We're not saying that, but it was just, doesn't look like somebody that sucks. Now, it's still a level of figuring things out. He hasn't played a lot of football. And I think at different times in that game, you could still see that. But even within, it's just like, this is a talented guy.
Right. You didn't look at that and say, oh, this guy's a bust. We should probably move on and try to find a new quarterback. And didn't think that about him in the first 3 quarters of a game with a whole bunch of rain. And then after that, it was monsoon for a quarter, injured. So how could you make a decision about Trey Lance based on how he's played, unless you really, really were bummed out about what you saw in the entire offseason leading up to last year when he was
going up against the number 1 defense in the NFL? Right. I don't think it's so much about him, to be honest. I think it's really more so about Brock Purdy. Where they feel Brock Purdy is and what they can do with Brock Purdy and what he has shown. And for them, it's, we win games. He's a great leader. We love the way he prepares. And this is all we need to be successful. And for them, like, I'm good with that. So I don't even think it's as much about Trey Lance. I think there is a form of kind of bad luck for Trey. Just when you had your opportunity, you got hurt. You broke your ankle. All right. So, hey, my bad that this Mr. Relevant guy came in, played extremely well, didn't lose a game, and was efficient, moved the ball, great leader, made plays. So, it's not so much your fault, but hey, it's what the situation is.
We found somebody else.
we're going to roll with the hot hand, which we've seen Kyle Shanahan do on numerous occasions at different positions.
We fell in love with somebody else. The heart wants what the heart wants.
What they do with Jimmy Ward, right? It's like Jimmy Ward got hurt, and all of a sudden it's like, what? Tayshaun Gibson and who fucking they took my job? So that's how they roll. Which I ain't mad at it. But I think it's more about Purdy than it is actually about like anything that Trey is or isn't. Yeah, now fans might see it a different way, but that's how I see it. I don't think it's so much about Trey.
I'm trying to decide if Purdy is more, because he's a little bit more athletic than Brees. Is he closer to Joe Montana? Is where I'm trying to. Is he?
Young Drew Brees could move.
Yeah, he was athletic. He was a great like tennis player, I think it was, as a young guy too. Like he was an athletic guy, underrated there. And I think a lot of really good quarterbacks are probably underrated with their feet and how they're able to move. Even Tom Brady was slow as heck, right? But he was smooth in the pocket, can move.
They can move. I saw how fast is old Matt Ryan, but I saw him last year strike for like a 60-yard run. So some of these guys, it was really weird.
They're not paying attention to him. Like, well, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, he did that a few times with the 49ers too. I think that was the 2019 season where he just kind of ripped off a couple runs, and I was like, what the heck?
All right, Croc. John Lynch's comments on Nick Bosa and his comments on Purdy and his comments on Aiyuk and his comments on Trey Lance, all very different. And I think it's really, really easy to read where the 49ers are with all those guys, in my opinion. Let's get some final conclusions on that John Lynch presser next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. And getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially when we're always changing and growing. And hopefully you are growing and changing and try to become a better self of you every single day. And every time you become a new, better self, you need to learn more about your new self. And that's where therapy comes in, all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we want it and why we react sometimes the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, super convenient, flexible, suited to fit your schedule. You don't have to fight traffic to get there right after work or hit a certain time. You can just open up your computer and do a virtual visit. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists, by the way, at any time for no additional charge. If you feel like it's not a good fit, you want to speak with a different therapist. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So when asked about Nick Bosa, John Lynch said the hotline is closed. Not happening. It's not even that hotline is closed, and it was never open. Which is not a surprising thing that he would say. The 49ers are not going to trade Nick Bosa. When asked about Brandon Aiyuk, Lynch said, quote, "We're trying to do something special this year, and Brandon is going to be a big part of that and beyond as well. We're really excited about Brandon. He took a big step last year. Best is yet to come." And he wouldn't say, he wanted to speak to the players first with Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Aiyuk, and he wouldn't say whether or not they were going to pick up their fifth-year options. I think it's all pretty clear that Kinlaw is most likely not going to get his picked up, and Brandon Aiyuk clearly will. But he said there's a plan to have Debo and Aiyuk together. And that's a win now thing. And I'm not surprised about that. If the 49ers were to trade Brandon Aiyuk, even for a really good haul, say a mid-first round pick, and they're able to get a stud offensive tackle, that's a move for the future. And that's a move for keeping the program going for a long time. But if they want to be the best team now today, they'll probably put a patchwork right tackle offensive line together. Hope McKivitz is the veteran, because who knows if a rookie would be able to come in and beat McKivitz anyway. They'll probably draft somebody to compete, maybe compete as a swing tackle and be the best offense that we just saw at the end of the year possible with Brock Purdy once he's healthy at quarterback. And that is the plan. That's the win now plan. So I'm not surprised about it. But I didn't get the feeling that Brandon Aiyuk was not available at all, or that maybe there's some plans that could change and next offseason we could talk about it again. But if he was to be moved, it would be a crazy haul probably if they were to move him this offseason. And they want to win now. And keeping Aiyuk is the best way to keep that offense humming.
Definitely keep him. I do feel like out of the guys that you just mentioned, the most replaceable one is probably Brandon Aiyuk. And the reason why I feel like he's replaceable, not because he's, not for a wide receiver one, right? I see that like, that's a wide receiver one. Yeah, kind of, but the targets say different, right? Like the targets, Debo's going to get more targets. Kittle's going to get more targets. McCaffrey might get more targets, and then you have him. So he's a wide receiver one in the sense of he does the most wide receiver type stuff, which is route running, catching the ball, like where he does it. But he's not. He's legitimately their fourth option, whether it's McCaffrey getting the ball in the backfield or catching the ball. And obviously the other two guys. So if I was able to get, a mid to kind of high first round pick, then can I get I would trade him.
You do that? So to tease a future episode, I wanted to do something pre-draft where it was like an either or. It was like, would you rather this or this? And I think one of those will be, and I'll let the listeners kind of ponder this as well, because we got to finish up this pod about the presser, but it would be like, okay, Brandon Aiyuk or say stud
Christian Gonzalez,
stud offensive tackle, plus draft some third round wide receivers, right? Christian Gonzalez, first rounder, and draft some wide receivers. That would be kind of. Hold on, don't answer it. That's for a future episode. Talk.
I was going to say,
don't answer it.
I was going to say Brandon Aiyuk or Christian Gonzalez and A.T. Perry.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Don't get too enamored with these prospects, Croc.
I know. That's why I haven't even watched the top guys like that. Don't do it. Gotta be trying to trade everybody.
So I think we're in lockstep trying to decipher what John Lynch is saying. Some of it point blank, like the Bosa stuff. Of course, Bosa's not available. He would hang up the phone if someone called and asked for Nick Bosa, right? Not happening. Brandon Aiyuk would listen, but that's probably not going to happen. They're probably not going to get what they need. They love Brock Purdy. He's the guy. It can't be more clear they love Brock Purdy, and the plan is that he's their starting quarterback. And listening to what he's saying about Trey Lance, they are absolutely ready to trade Trey Lance. Now, they might trade him later. They might rather trade him later, but that's just going to mean he's going to cost less to that team that they trade him to. So I think you can have him now, because there was a report from Peter King, I think, and there was a report from Rappaport talking about, they could hang on to him until August, make sure Brock Purdy's ready to go before they trade him. Well, that's just going to tank. There's no sense trading him at that point. That tanks his value, because if he's the backup quarterback at that point and the team didn't get to have the entire offseason and training camp to train up their new quarterback, then it's going to be growing pains going into the season. That's another year from his rookie contract that's lost for that new team. And so, and a team has to make their plans during the draft. So if someone's going to pony up anything for Trey Lance, it's going to be on draft day. Right, because that's a part of their plan going forward. So if they don't trade him on draft day, then Trey Lance either becomes the starter or his value's tanked, and they're not going to get anything for him later. So the August thing, I get it from a standpoint of you hold on to him because you want to make sure Brock is ready, but that's a hold on to Trey scenario. That's not a trade Trey scenario to me. You either trade him on draft night when you get the offers, or you don't trade him at all.
One of the notes that I wrote down from the presser, and it says, maybe I'm paraphrasing something I heard John Lynch say, but Brock's injury makes it more difficult to trade Trey Lance. So
yes,
that was what whatever he said, that was what I took away from it at that moment. That if it weren't for the injury, then they would probably be more. It'd make it a lot easier to trade him. And I think that's how it was. Yes. The question was phrased. Like, does Brock's injury make it more difficult to move on from Trey Lance? And he was like, yeah, you got to take that into consideration. And I'm like, yeah, they would get rid of his ass.
Yeah. And I think they still would. But the question is, what would they be asking? And will a team offer it? And with the report last week that the 49ers, the people were calling the 49ers and the Niners weren't calling other people, that sounded like a bat signal from the 49ers saying, hey, give us some offers. We're ready to trade him. Just because the way that trade was worded, it sounded like it came from Santa Clara, right? Or else why would it be so worded in that exact way?
And especially when you hear John Lynch say that it's kind of blown out of proportion, the way that they made it seem teams are calling for him. So, but teams are definitely doing their due diligence, but it's not going, there's no offers on the table.
Right. And he said it's, nothing substantive yet, but that might be him, saying, but we're, they're listening. So I would say there's at least a 50% chance Trey Lance gets traded on draft night. To me, I think some other insiders were asked, and they thought it was much lower than that. I think there's a pretty good chance. There's a lot of quarterbacks. I come back to the Hendon Hooker thing. You're going to draft 26-year-old Hendon Hooker and spend a pick. I would rather spend that pick on Trey Lance. Knowing everything I know about Trey Lance, I would easily rather have Trey Lance than Hendon Hooker for the same draft pick.
We didn't dive into a whole lot of what they were saying about Lance because we kind of got stuck on the whole like what they think of Purdy.
Yeah,
but which they have every right to feel the way they do about Purdy. But some things that they said about Trey Lance that I just kind of took note of. They are focused on Trey's ability to compete and play a role on this team. Needed 5 quarterbacks last year, so they value everybody in that group. So he kind of flipped whatever they had asked him. John Lynch did a great job of flipping it to where it's like, hey, all the quarterbacks are important.
Yeah, all the quarterbacks. We like Trey. I don't have it now up in front of me. His exact words on Trey was it was
expect Trey to be on the roster and
we expect
ability to compete.
Yeah, I expect Trey to be here. That was the quote.
Yeah, and there was another thing that he said. Where was it?
And just here, it's funny because he's not really lying with any of this, but when you hear him talk about the different players, if he's answering them differently. So clearly he feels differently about him. Like he's like, oh, well, we expect him to be here. And he's kind of talking around it. And then he asks about Nick Bosa, who everybody knows is not available. And he's like, oh, nope, that hotline's closed. He didn't say that about Brian Aiyuk. He didn't say that about Trey Lance, right? So there's still a big difference. So there's something to be taken from it. And I think it's probably not very different than what we thought. And I think he solidified what I thought coming in. They love Brock. Trey's available. Brandon Aiyuk, it would take a lot, and he's part of the plan that they want to roll with now. And obviously, I don't know why I kind of like that they asked about Bosa, even though we already knew Bosa's not going anywhere. But it just gave us a new answer to kind of compare the other answers to. So I like that they asked that question.
Yeah, and the other part too, which I want to say maybe it was our guy Grant Cohn, friend of the podcast, and he said, or somebody. Okay, I don't even want to say it was Grant. Maybe it was someone else. I can't remember exactly who said it, but they said, has Trey reached out about potentially being traded if he doesn't have an opportunity to compete? And he said, no, they haven't had that conversation.
Yeah, no, that was Grant. And his answer was, nope, shook his head and looked away, wait for a new question. That was the shortest answer of the entire press conference. He didn't really say the word no. He's going, nah, and looked around waiting for another question.
Right. Which is, I mean, again, shout out to Grant for asking that question because
Great
that
question.
is a legit question because what have I been saying? Don't have me here if I don't have a legit opportunity. And he kept talking about how, yeah, Trey is ready to compete. It's like, compete for what? You're like, it's clear right now what's going on. And again, rightfully so. Purdy's your guy. But if I can't compete, if I'm Lance and he's reworked some of his things. He's worked on some different things in the offseason. He's ready to compete, do these things. Let me compete somewhere else where I have a legit opportunity to compete for something, as opposed to just coming out here, busting my butt, working hard, learning all these things, putting my best foot forward, doing well. And it's like, well, your well is not good enough because you didn't do it in actual games. So we really had no intentions on really starting you. And this is really Brock Purdy's job. But we just kept you because because we can. Oh, because Brock Purdy was hurt. Like, heck no, man, get me out of here.
Yeah. If I'm Trey Lance or Trey Lance's agent, and I thought it would help grease the wheels on a trade away from the team, I might do something like that before the draft, just to let the team know. It's like, look, if you're on the fence, we need a fresh start over here because we don't think we're going to get a legit chance to compete for this job.
Right. And I hate it for Lance, who, in this the part I hate for him, just the personal side of things, who like is working hard because he wants a real opportunity.
Right. Oh yeah. Genuine.
Like, I mean, I'm working really hard because I want a chance to start. And they're like, you got no chance, buddy. I don't care what you do this offseason. Like, what would he have to do to start? I mean, it would have to be he's coming out there looking like what's his name? Brian Hoyer in the offseason. Remember, Brian Hoyer was cooking. So you gotta come out there look like Brian Hoyer. If you ain't cooking like Hoyer, It's like, bro, you got no chance.
That's what's crazy is clearly, like we've talked about Kyle Shanahan, like he treats his quarterbacks like he's a preteen, like having a crush on somebody else, a different crush every week. All it would take is a good offseason for Trey Lance. Brock's hurt. Trey Lance goes out there and looks good. Over. It's Trey's again. That's all it takes. So that's what it took for Purdy.
So maybe that's what the conversation. John said we've had conversations with Trey. He understands what this situation is and the circumstances, etc. Maybe it is like, look, if you go out there and you kill it, then heck yeah, like you know, this is a legit opportunity. Hey, we could even put Purdy on pup for a little while and give you an extended run at this.
It's weird that he wouldn't publicly say that more though. They've never really publicly said stuff like that. And it would help
out of respect.
It would help the 49ers to say that. It doesn't really help the 49ers in any way. It doesn't help them trade Trey. Doesn't help Trey's confidence. Brock Purdy doesn't care. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need to hear that he's the leader in the clubhouse, you know? So it's a little strange that they haven't been more publicly like, oh, dude, Trey, we expect him to come in and compete for this job. And he's going to, he's got all the talent in the world. Like over the top
they don't lie. Yeah. I mean, everybody thinks they lie. They have a hard time. They have a hard time not telling you how they really feel.
The other part, the last thing here, John Lynch asked what he wants in his draft prospects. He wants smart, fast, big, tough, competitive.
Someone brought up like Kelly Witherspoon and Joe Williams and those guys. I obviously went straight to Dante Pettis, and they're like, yeah, we figured out those guys. Or actually, I really liked his answer. He said everyone else plays so much like that the guy that doesn't, he will weed himself out by himself. Like, you'll know, everybody will know that he doesn't fit in with what we're doing here, and eventually he'll just be out of there. And I really like that.
They've learned. They were naive. They were a naive front office to start the way they built this team. I think they've learned some lessons for sure. Well, and one of those is character, and I don't think they're going to draft those guys anymore.
Right. The moment I heard, and this is why I think they're naive on Dante Pettis. The moment I heard him talk, I was like, I mean, talented, and like you said, we didn't miss on the talent part of it. We missed on the spirit.
They kind of did.
That's like, the word
he wasn't worth trading up to get versus guys that were still around.
No, he wasn't worth it based on what he ultimately ended up being in the NFL. But like, if you just watch what he was doing as a rookie, did they really miss on the talent?
Yeah, I mean,
whooping guys, they couldn't touch him off the line of scrimmage. He's killing guys with routes. He had a 70 or 80-yard touchdown with the run after catch on the big post. Like, he had all of it. I mean, he showed, like, I got it. Right?
I mean,
especially down the stretch when he came back from that knee injury. Because remember, he got bent backwards doing a punt return against the Chargers. When he came back from that down the stretch, what do you have? Like, over the last 5 games, like 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, whatever it was. Like, no, he can play.
It was the Brandon Aiyuk thing. Remember when Kyle Shanahan's like,
he's the only guy.
He's the only guy we had to throw to, so we threw it to him a lot. That's what it was. No, but like when you look at young Pettis, you look at him in college and college evaluation, even still, even with his best is what he did, it wasn't better than Michael Gallup and DJ Chark and the guys that went after him in the second round. So
I thought he was a day 2 guy though. Like, and I thought he was a second round. Like, when I watched Pettis, I hadn't heard him talk yet, but when I watched Pettis,
he's a cat person. You didn't ask him that question.
Right. I tried to leave that out because I have cats now. So I try to leave it.
I'm a cat person, but if you have to be smart enough to know that if you get asked that question at the combine interview, you say you're a dog person.
100%. And at my core, I am a dog person. I just randomly had cats because it was like a stray cat. So that's the only reason why. It is kind of cool. He's all black, but I'm not a Pettis cat guy. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even, if somebody was like, hey, Croc, want to buy this cat? Like, no, I don't want that at all. Like, I like give me a Ken Corso. You feel me? So
I would just, I would say no to all your animals. It's like, do you want this goldfish? Do not want that in my house. Do you want this rabbit? Nope. Don't want that either. All right. Thanks everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to all the everydayers. Tomorrow, Winky Wednesday. Croc coming up this week. I found my guy for the 49ers. There's a whole bunch of edge guys I've been looking at, round 3 area. Found my dude. The Peacock My Guys episode is going to be coming up here pretty soon. There's very few episodes before the NFL draft. We're going live after the first round, right, Croc?
Let's do it. I got, we will.
Yeah. Well, you got something else? You can drop something on us?
Bleacher Report.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're gonna go live with that too. Okay, well, check Croc out there and check.
No. Check me out here first. All right, Locked On 49ers. Let's go.
Here always first. Locked On 49ers every single day. Talk to you next time. Locked On 49ers.
Go Lakers.
No, do not go.